What if you had no microservices? In the tech community, we often consider monoliths to be bad and microservices to be the obvious thing. But do we actually know what microservices solve for? Today, Kanav and I will build a scenario of using only monoliths to scale. Stay tuned till the very end, where I'll share why we shifted to microservices at Urban Company, even though it might be still all possible on monoliths. So let's dive in. Welcome to 10x Engineering. This podcast is by Urban Company, Asia's biggest platform for home services. Kanav, let me actually build a scenario of what the world might look like in a company before there is an urgent need for microservices. Right? So typically everything starts with singularity. So you have a single engineer, single code base, single database. Right? And from here on, things start to build on. In a couple of months, your tech is broadly organized in 3 layers. You will probably have the client layer. In today's world, that would be just app and app code. In the back end, it is going to be just 2 layers, right? Everything will have API logic, so you would have controller files, or databases where you will have data schemas in your code base, right? And I think beyond this, there isn't much of distinction in an early company outside these layers. I think most features also, when they're added to existing APIs or as existing schemas. It's very hard to kind of do the right split, right? And there's no surprise that some of the most bloated files in a monolith would often be around the initial few entities, right? So your customer controller, your provider or your vendor controller, your order controller would be where the juice is, the trouble lies. I would say actually up till here, you have a single repository. Arguably, it still might be manageable. Right, the real complexity comes when your teams also start to scale. You go from 1 to 10 to 30 to 50 engineers. And this is where people have divided, but your code and your data is not quite divided. Right, and this is where the concept of ownership starts to break. Right, and I think in any company we'll start to hear very typical complaints. Right, for example, someone else's merge request created a bug in my feature. Yep. A very classic monolith problem. Modifying a feature needs tens of APIs to be modified. There is no singular place to edit one feature, right? Or my personal favorite, an unindexed database query brings down the whole system for everyone, right? And because beyond a point, there's no way to figure out or split deployments, right? And I think this is where microservices typically come in. Let's start out a discussion at this point. Right, microservices seem to be the obvious choice, but why would anyone in their right mind choose to stick to a monolith still?
Yeah, absolutely, Raghav. So while I think the advantages of using microservices is very, very well known, some of the advantages which you have discovered, you have talked about also. On the flip side, there are a few very noticeable trade-offs with microservices too. Some of which have also been very well documented. So I'll try to cover some of them. Number one is that microservices communicate through a network layer, right? And this is not only slower, but also with the added complexity that these calls could fail. So you have to build this extra resiliency and you have to figure out ways to achieve consistency across microservices. In a monolith, it's just a function call. So you're pretty much guaranteed that that's going to happen. With a fraction of performance, you have to cost you what you have to pay. So that's a clear win. Number two is, I think, to really is around tooling. So to really gain benefits of everything which you described in terms of ownership of microservices, you have to invest in tooling. So things like continuous deployment, ability to view microservices or the dependencies, lots of works in DevOps to easily deploy microservices in a variety of infrastructure, which is segregated, and then it's maintenance. So all of that stuff you need to kind of invest in as a team. And finally, I think apart from this, there are a few hidden costs also. The thing is, it's very hard to accurately split your code into microservices, such that dependencies between teams is very limited. It's just almost impossible. Even if you do an averagely good job at splitting microservices, you will often run into situations where one change or feature would require you to make changes to multiple microservices which are owned by different teams. And then you have to sequence out these deployments so that things don't break, yada. But for a growing company, right, what actually happens is it's even more problematic, because as your business matures and your understanding of real world to system matures, you need to keep splitting your code into microservices and breaking and reconstructing interfaces between microservices. And in a monolith, this is somewhat easier, right? Because if you depend on, let's say, another function, you change the implementation of it, you look at all the callers, you change all the callers, you get some compile time check on it also, and all of this in one merge request, right? And then you deploy it in one go and you're done. But in microservices, right, like this function is probably in a different microservice, it's probably written in different style or probably a different language, so you have to go and change it. Then you have to change it in a backward compatible way. Then you have to go to all the callers and then change them also in some way, and then you have to sequence out deployments, and all of this is happening across teams. So it's a lot more complicated, right? And these are, so while there are a few tangible, there are also some very, very intangible costs to microservices, especially when you take that journey too soon. So there is some merit in, I think, keeping yourself as a monolith as much as you can.
I remember when we shifted to microservices, for about half a year at least, it used to be very painful because people would split one repository into multiple repositories, deployment. Sometimes the sequencing would actually take 2 days because you'd introduce a bug, then you'd have to roll back every single of the 5 deployments you've done and then redo it again. And it was a painful journey because it was not very clear
and fundamentally splitting it is very, very hard.
Well. So fair enough. So I think, So basically you're saying it's definitely not a silver bullet. In fact, it does come with its own significant downsides, which people need to be aware of. There are investments which you have to make upfront, right? Let's actually have a conversation on monoliths, where let's try to introduce the merits of microservices without actually having to jump onto this extreme lever, right? Let's start with code. In the early days, what you expect is most of your code is organized by API controller files, right? How do you go from this structure of this, vague API controller file, code bases, some of these files being very, very bloated, to something better, perhaps in the microservices world, how you might assume?
So I think what we are trying to solve, Raghav, here is ownership of code. Which is very well defined in microservices. You kind of want to define some sort of code boundaries on ownership in monolith also. And I think the concept of modules within a repository really, really helps here. What do I mean by module? It's nothing but a well encapsulated and a purposeful capability with well-defined interfaces on how other modules can interact with it. And so the scenario which you presented, there are a bunch of API controller files. If you want to go to this route, I think the easiest way is to introduce below this layer these concepts of modules. So rather than putting business logic in your controller files, you start to interact with these well-formed modules which offer better interfaces and encapsulate the internal logic. And the way these modules also interact with other modules is the same way, through these interfaces. And over a period of time, you can somewhat define ownership of these modules by your smaller teams which you have. And so you kind of can achieve a lot of gains of code segregation within a monolith without having to jump into the microservices world or get the trade-offs from it also.
So if I were at a point where I had like an ugly monolith year, 2 years down, what I'm hearing is right now majority of my code is just one layer, which is just the APIs, perhaps called controller files, right?
Yeah.
What you're saying is actually introduce another layer called a module layer, which is perhaps where all the code lives. Divide code into modules, right? And you want to establish ownership of the interface of this module. And APIs will just be calling any of these modules. So the code actually sits one level below. I think that's a wonderful way to kind of split, right? Yeah. And modules become the main conversation of code then. I think there's one thing which will happen in practice which becomes hard. This is still a single repository. So are there any ways where you think it will become easier to enforce creation of these modules or respecting the boundaries of these modules?
We can obviously train and coach folks, and a majority of the people are following that. They know about these guidelines and they get caught in code review, and I think code kind of starts to look similar. So that's definitely there. But I think, and there could be a way where we could make it harder to make these type of mistakes. I think linting is fairly evolved. But even more than that, I think if you wanted to make it a little bit more strict, these modules, if you have some sort of an interface class and these modules could inherit from that. And when they inherit from there, they have to explicitly expose what functions they want to expose publicly. So there's a place where you can explicitly do that. And then only these functions can be imported in other modules. So having some sort of a layer in between can kind of help enforce this in some way. And you can get it such that you don't just rely on guidelines, for example.
I think I really like that platformization. You're basically saying that, yes, it will be easier to cheat between these modules, but what you could do is as a platform develop some kind of an interface which, a module extends or implements, right? And that gives you a lot of controls. Like then after that, you can kind of enforce tracking. You could do like authorization, all kinds of things. I think that's a good way to platformize some bit of enforcement. What about data though? I think we've basically split our code by modules, but data at this point in a younger company would still be kind of mixed and matched, right? Different modules might be using the same data tables, right? And what would happen is your module has made a certain change, right? Now my module is sharing the same table. What might happen is my module might start seeing bugs because the change you've done, because you didn't know how my module operates. And we see this all the time, right? My favorites are, I remember counters used to be a mess back in the day because, who created those counters, how do you read those counters became messy. States are the worst because typically how a state gets managed for any entity keeps changing, right? What is cancellation? And multiple features tend to kind of dictate that. So how would you kind of now extend the same thing to bettering data ownership?
I mean, the fundamental problem here is that data ownership is not well defined. I think what we did in the previous thing with modules is we were able to segregate code by module. So we were able to segregate and very well define what code ownership would look like. But data is across multiple tables or collections, is open for read and write by all of these modules. So we need to kind of figure out how to solve data ownership in this world. So one way we can start is immediately we could start doing this is to encapsulate these data tables and schema, the access of it within a module. So only the module that has access to, read and write from these data models can do that directly. Rest every other module which needs access to this data, they have to go to the function interfaces which the modules define, right? And what this helps very crisply define data ownership at a module level itself. And to avoid mistakes here, I think we could also once again promote it via teaching. But I think as we like a very platform approach. So if you want to go through the enforcement route, our module which could inherit from an interface, so as we described in the last time, and at the time of initialization of that module, the module could explicitly say which data models or tables or collection it wants to depend upon. And then with a little bit of magic normally you're using an ORM layer. So if you have a little bit of magic around it, and if your models are using that ORM layer, you could solve for some level of authentication and authorization of it. And you can make sure that model only accesses tables which it has subscribed to. That could be potentially a way to achieve it in Monolith itself.
Yeah, basically what you're doing is you're replicating how service discovery pans out in the microservices world, and you're trying to recreate that inside the monolith by actually putting wrappers, right? So your ORMs in this case could be wrapped in your own platform version, so that you can have some config which dictates a module versus an ORM. Like how do you kind of control it? In fact, we're going to give a link to our blog which talks about service discovery and how we were able to do it very early on in our days, right? So check out the blog itself. I think, so now we've established schema ownership, right? So with what you're saying, we're able to separate data also at a code level. Correct?
Which type of data is with module? Which module?
Now, one thing which I've seen which will happen oftentimes is as things start to scale a little bit, right? And then more data kind of comes in. While ownership of code and data schemas is separate, there is still a breakage which happens related to data, right? And an example of this would be there's a dev who's forgot to build an index on a new feature he created, right? So the data table is not indexed well. Now a query which will run for this API call could literally jam the whole system at some point. How would you prevent this in our monoliths example?
Yeah. So I think what we ended up solving was data ownership. So we clearly know which data is responsibility of which module or which team, for example. So that is done. But what we haven't done is the underlying data is still all on the same database or the same database machine, right? So what we need to solve for is complete database segregation. We want to maybe deploy some of our databases or database collections into completely separate machine. So the previous encapsulation of when we brought data inside modules helps with that too. So since data access is completely encapsulated within the module, so different module owners could easily migrate this data into a separate database or which is hosted on a separate machine, which has its own compute and scale needs. And all of this works seamlessly because, right, other modules don't care because they are not accessing this data directly. They're still going through the module interfaces. So this is a step in journey. I think if you do the first part correct, I think this is just an extra bonus which you can achieve as you scale up and realize you want to separate out some of your databases.
So you have established the concept of modules, and in the right way for someone to look at it is modules is equal to the microservices version in a monolith. It will help you separate your code, help you separate your schema. The problem of database choking could be solved by literally creating new databases. So if your code is separated by data tables, then it's very easy to copy paste those tables into separate databases. Though I would actually point here, I do think there is a cost here as well. While the other two things, the code and the schema separation, I would urge anyone to be paranoid about it from day one. It can't hurt you. I think separating databases very early has a cost to it, and it is literally the cost, right? The cost of the dollar cost to it, because now you have these big machines and you need redundancy in databases. So suddenly it becomes a lot of dollars for the company. There's also cost of maintainability, DevOps, because now you have suddenly these multiple machine clusters running, and you want to kind of time at least that a bit well.
Even in the microservices world, I think each microservice having its own database might be an overkill. So you kind of want to figure out some vertical of cluster of teams who kind of operate on one database machine, and it should just work then from there. Then that's where you resolve database ownership at that level.
Kanav, I have now a few scenarios where I think this will still break, right? And I want to see if monolith actually holds still fine, right? So I think one scenario which comes to my mind is right now we still have a single repository. Sure, databases are separate, but that the deployment of this whole code is still happening on one machine. Hence, all modules which we have created, even though they're separate, are still deployed in one machine. Now, one easy scenario is, what if you have two independent modules? Completely independent, let's assume that. If one module had a bug in it, just because they're deployed on the same machine, the whole machine will come down, the other module will also struggle, right? So why should that poor module struggle becomes one question. It becomes pretty irritating, especially for larger teams, right? Where suddenly now teams are dependent on each other just because things are starting to break in production, even though the coding has been done separately in modules.
So I think the problem here is that these independent modules are still deployed on the same infrastructure. So one bug can cause the other to break too, because it's all on the same machine. So what we need to do is essentially we need to separate out the infrastructure for both these modules. So provided they are completely independent, if they are truly independent, then you could deploy the whole monolith repo can just be deployed on two different types of infrastructures, right? And if you do some sort of magic at your gateway layer, and you have then you can have some module specific APIs be directed to the right type of infrastructure, and this way it could still work. And this also works, for example, if you have an independent module which has a lot more scale or throughput requirements and needs to be run on a different type of infrastructure. So you could do that also with this. So just deploy the two monoliths on two different infrastructures, and then do some magic to route the APIs into the specific infrastructure, and you can kind of achieve some level of independence between the modules, even in a monolith. Yeah.
this is actually a very interesting strategy because we've also used it in our past. I think the place where we used this the most, in the past was we would actually separate it by stakeholders. So even though you might have the same repository and the same deployment end of the day, we basically said that anything coming from the partner apps or our supply side will hit a different set of machines. Anything coming from customers will hit a separate different machines, and anything which is for internal use, like internal dashboards and stuff, we put application boxes separately. And I think that prevented, at least in the case of independent modules, a customer bug did not bring out or create a downtime for the partner app. Right? I think this is an effective strategy, especially when you start to split by stakeholders, because your gateway does need to know some way to split the traffic, right? But I think it's very hard to be truly independent. I think in all the years of building, what I've realized is the most, obscure features on two sides could actually find a lot of dependence, right? So how do you kind of manage this scenario when there are two modules which are dependent now? Because now stakeholder separation is not going to help.
Yeah, true. I mean, this is a classic case, but I think I would argue, Raghav, this is also a problem in microservices, right? When microservices call other microservices, interfaces or contracts between them could break. The other dependent microservice could stop responding or could start responding very slowly. This leads to often cascading problems where dependent services also start breaking or start running slowly. And so how do you normally solve this in microservice world, right? Either you start moving to more of an async paradigm, or you start using a lot more timeouts, or you start using, something like circuit breakers, which basically automatically break the connection between microservices if it's continuously failing, and then helps with some other downstream impact too. So even in our monolith case, I think we will need to do something similar between modules. So having the right error handling between the place where modules are interacting with other modules, quite similar to normally what you would build for microservices. So similar concepts like timeouts, circuit breakers could very well be built at this layer where modules are interacting with other modules. And I think fundamentally what you're trying to do is you're trying to build for failure. You're trying to assume that the other module or other microservice might fail. So you're kind of safeguarding against it. So very, very similar principles. I think what you do in microservices apply over here also. I wouldn't say it's something which is solved very well in microservices also, to that matter. Yeah.
I mean, in fact, I would say what you're referring to, there's another popular term, which is the cascading effect, which is industry-wide known. And in fact, I would argue that it's harder in microservices. It's much easier when your deployment and everything is in the same repository, because the beauty in a single repository is you're able to actually detect when a failure happens. You might not be able to solve it, but at least able to detect because you get a single stack trace. In microservices with different machines, there's this whole problem statement of observability, right? And now you have to track one request across multiple services. There's tracing involved, distributed tracing and whatnot. So it's actually fairly complex in the microservices world to figure out problems related to cascading effect, let alone solving it well. So I think this for me leaves only one scenario in my mind, right? So far we've defended well on how to scale monoliths with advantages of microservices as well. I think you kind of touched upon this. Suppose you have two modules, but they have different compute requirements.
Okay.
So Kanav might make a call as a customer, right, through one API. Right now, Kanav's, yes, we've been able to split deployments, but for Kanav, there's still one machine which is running all his modules, right? But if one module has a different compute requirement, right, versus another, we can't do that in our current model, what you've recommended, because my machine is the same. What will happen is we'll be running an ineffective tech ecosystem. What about this scenario? How would you kind of solve this?
So this is a super tough one. And I will caveat this with being a hypothetical scenario, but I think if compute requirements are very different, so this is a given. Let's see how we can solve it, right? So this is a given. You have to deploy it on the different modules on different infrastructure, right? So let's say I deploy my monolith on two different infrastructures. So infra A, which is optimized for module A, and infra B, which is optimized for module B. So now if my module A has to call module B, I can't call it on the same infra A, right? Like same infrastructure. I have to go through some sort of RPC or network layer route to find the right infrastructure for module B, which is infra B, which is hosted on infra B. And I think if the calls between modules in our monolith are interfaced by a layer, then this layer is where we could kick in and put it for some modules. We want to actually make it, rather than making it a function call, we want to actually make a call over the network to another infrastructure, which is just for that module. So, but I think a lot of people might say at this point, it is pretty much like microservices, but it is kind of achievable in a monolith also in some way. Yeah.
So finally, we've broken our monolith model, and I think I'd agree. I think microservices at some point become eventuality.
Yeah.
It's a bit hard to solve this scenario without actually separating deployments for a module itself, right? And then it is basically a pure microservices because your deployments, your database, your code, your schemas, all are kind of separated. In fact, the biggest cost here at this point is what you called out, which is shifting to network calls versus function calls. And this is very expensive because it typically requires a ton of refactoring of code. And we'll give a blog link to what RPCs are, because that's a very effective way to merge the two worlds. I remember when we did our microservices, we actually used to load a service into a monolith as a library, right? And because at that point we hadn't sorted deployment, but because of RPC, we actually did not require to refactor any code. We used promises coupled with RPC and it solved the problem. So I think to conclude, we have tried building a case that it is possible to replicate most of the advantages of microservices without actually having to shift to them. In fact, what microservices is trying to solve for is defining ownership. It's defining the boundaries of what we say is a module or a capability. And if you think about it, it's basically single responsibility principle of software engineering, right, which applies to this. And I would say you could build further on it. Why not? Why just code? If you apply this to people, if your team, your code, your data, and your infrastructure is all split by the same boundary, you actually achieve massive amounts of efficiency in your team building. It obviously takes time to kind of get all of these aligned. I think the most important thing here is to be paranoid from day one about segregation or separation of concerns, right? And I think this from day one could be applied at least to your code and your data schemas. I think these are the two things as an advice I would give to our younger self if we had to do it, better than what we already did. And now, as promised, I will end by telling the one thing, the one reason why doing pure microservices early on can be beneficial, right? It acts, in my opinion, as a forcing function for code and data, right? At least as a service level, using a microservice, you are able to enforce certain rules. Most times in a very fast-paced environment where the team is young, you're not able to actually follow a lot of best practices, right? And I've realized at that point, microservices help by avoiding the disadvantages of monoliths, instead of leveraging their own advantages, right? So it's really, I think, at least early days, microservices are more about not committing bad practices, not committing crime, as I would call it, than anything else. And I think at Urban Company also we started off early with microservices for the same reason. It was to enforce boundaries. Otherwise, it would have become very hard to kind of maintain quality and speed. I don't think we were purists when we started. It was a journey. And that's where all the tricks we've discussed through this podcast came in handy, right? Every microservice also becomes a monolith at some point, right? Because you keep adding to it. And hence, when we create our microservices at Urban Company, every microservice inside has these small modules, right? Just like our example of monolith having modules, we create every microservices with these, and they follow all the rules of segregation of data, not cheating and not querying each other's inner code, right? And what this helps is, and when the time comes for them to be split into their own microservices, actually very, very easy, right? And because we use RPCA also, the transition becomes very simplistic. So with that, we come to an end of this podcast. Hope you all enjoyed this. Please subscribe to the channel and check out the blogs. See you next time.